Hello everybody, welcome back to Demon Souls Cheese All Bosses. This will be an updated version of the last video I made on this subject, because lots of new straps were found in the last couple months. They'll primarily revolve around the new tech using a bow, found by Nut, a challenge runner. I actually made a dual video release alongside this video, explaining the entire tech more in depth than I do in this video. If you'd like to watch that after this, I'll make sure to link at the very end. Before that though, I would like to make an addendum to the last video strap for Phalanx. So let's jump right in. So for Phalanx, you can't exactly do any of the bow tech cheese that we are going to discuss primarily in the video. But I come up with a strategy for this video that requires a skip that we didn't really discuss in the last video either. So we will need a lot of firebombs, so I would recommend starting with the firebomb item as a starter gift. That should give you 5 to start off with. And then you can pick up 2 extra sets, one in here right after this little doorway and before these stairs and the fog wall. There'll be fire bombs. The next set is after the first boulder trap. If you go to the tower that leads you back down to the shortcut, there will be fire bombs at the top of the tower, so there'll be another 6. This should result in 16 bombs total, which should be just about enough, but if you want to get more, you could actually farm a lot of the enemies in the level. Actually, it wouldn't hurt to go down the tower to go get the cling ring to be extra safe for the boss coming up. So if you want to do that, feel free. But now we're going to do the 1-1 skip. So you want to go back up the tower and then go to around here where it leads you to the mausoleum. To be extra safe, you would like to kill these 2 enemies. And then I would recommend next to this shelf right here to quit out. This is going to be a start of the skip. So for ease, I would recommend going to cinematic mode and then loading back in. And then go inside the shelf and just keep walking towards the wall until you go over it. So you'll see that you're actually now out of bounds, even though it doesn't quite look like it. So going forward, do follow my line that I'm taking here, because there's a lot of holes in the floor that you can't see. It looks like a normal floor, but it's not. So follow my pathing here. This skip was found by Experivit333. I want to say in March or May or something like that. But at first it wasn't applicable for speedruns because there were some issues with the routing. We're going to get to this wall, and it looks like this is a fall, but actually not. You can actually walk over this. Not entirely. There is a bit of area to the left that you can't walk through. But I like to use this little like puddle of water as a reference to about as far as I can get to the left, which I will be using shortly. We want to walk forward until we get to about here. And I like to stare right at that little window looking thing in the wall and just run at it. If you do this right, you should land right here on this little lip outcrop of the wall. And you can walk along that and then drop down to the left here. If you miss this drop, you should quit out quickly. Make sure to practice your quit out before doing this. And then go this way. I would recommend having your camera in the wall, because if not, it's going to like flash because the area deloads a little bit. Then you're going to get to this little pole thingy. Quit out again. If you went back to performance at any point, go back to cinematic, load back in. Then you're going to get inside this pole as center as you can. You're going to boost up. Then I want you to walk to the corner of this little thing. I don't know what it is. You can go back to performance now if you like. Quit out one more time. Load back in. And you'll see that it says on top Lord's Path, which is, if you did that, you did it right. And now you are going to die. I would recommend putting the cling ring before you doing this. And you can see that we're actually now inside the Phalanx boss room, but the boss isn't quite here yet. So let's go back up here. Now you can see the models, a lot of the little hoplites are there in a very nice little row. It's actually very satisfying to look at. But if you look around, you can't see the actual boss fight. That is because it's not actually in the room. It might be under the map or something, just waiting to be loaded in. And if you try to shoot the little hoplites, actually don't take any damage either. So what we're going to have to do is actually trigger the boss by going to the gate. Even though it's closed, the fog crossing animation and prompt is going to show up anyway. So click that. And now you can activate with the boss fog. But as you saw where I was going, there's no fog at the end of the tunnel that would lead you to 1-2. So theoretically you actually can skip this boss, and we did do it in some speedruns, but we're not going to quite do that. Where I'm going to show you how to cheese this boss in particular. So I would recommend dragging the boss to the tunnel. It is going to stop right at the edge of it. It can't go too far. But hold up your shield as you do so, because it can still throw spears at you. So If you want to just see, one of these is going to throw a spear at me shortly. There you go. So that's why Cling Ring is a little bit nice to have. Just have a little more extra health. So if you can tell, what we're going to do now is just chuck the fire bombs at it. Just chuck them at the boss a little bit high up so it can spread out a lot of the Phalanx. And you can literally just chuck them all. You may occasionally get hit by a spear flying at you, but that's why you get a little extra health for the Cling Ring. So with 16 bombs, I did take most of its health. I did require one extra just hit from myself, but I mean, again, it's just, it can't even get to you, so it's pretty easy. If you get more than that, you could get 17 or 18, it might be fine, but there's a little bit of RNG there. But regardless, that's pretty simple. That is the first boss down without any danger whatsoever, besides dying to get here. Alright, now the actual bow tech cheese that I alluded to earlier. So this again was just found by Nut. He found the technique altogether. So if you played the Demon Souls Remake, you probably know that you have a lot of freedom with your bow. You can move around while still aiming and stuff, and you can even aim without the reticle. So they give you a lot of freedom with this. What you may not have known though is that if you actually cross a fog wall by simply pressing X and then just facing your camera anywhere else and pressing L1 to aim, it will actually give you control of your direction of movement once again. So you can use this to actually go in the fog and then go back out if you wish. Or in some situations, this will actually make all the enemies that are in the level that you're just in kind of reset and go back to their positions. And you can still hit them and they won't actually activate or anything. So you could use this to actually explore the area for any dangerous area that you want. Another fun fact is you can actually do this in vaultable ledges as well. So you can use this to kind of like guide your movement after vault, which is a lot less useful thus far as we've tested this tech a lot. But it is something that you can abuse as well. Again, I did make a video going about this more in depth, so if you would like to watch that, make sure to click that at the end of the video. And I did briefly test to see if there's anything I can do with this for the Phalanx itself. The closest I could do is get into a pillar wall where you can't exactly reach me too well. It can still hit me once in a while, but I can't hit it back too well either. So another testing, I simply brought out Poison Cloud and see if I can poison the boss from here, which would be pretty ideal. But it doesn't seem like the boss itself actually poisons, only the hoplites, so it actually wasn't useful at all. Anywho, so back to Tower Knight. Now that we have what we need to be able to cheese Tower Knight. If you need a bow because you didn't start with one for this character, I started with the Hunter class, so I had one to begin with. You can get this one after the second fire bridge with the dragon before the fog gate on top of the tower. And then you can make your way to the boss itself and then quitting out because you actually can't freeze this boss right away where the cutscene hasn't been triggered. It'll pretty much trigger any time you go in there as far as we've found so far. So skip the cutscene, quit out. And then we're going to try this again. Now the cutscene's gone, it should be actually possible to freeze it. But what you're going to do is just kind of go in the right corner of the fog, enter with X, and then immediately hold L1 to kind of go at it at an angle, like so. You should be kind of aiming for the flowers, but don't go too far right because you're going to get stuck in the wall as well, which can be fixable, but that's just kind of how we go. So yeah, if you did it right, if you did it enough to the right but not enough to get caught on the wall, you should actually see that the boss is frozen. Now, as you can probably see by now, the archers are still activated, but all you have to do is really go out of your way to kill them. We do have a way to fight it in the speedrun, but you can watch a speedrun if you want to see how we do it there. I simply kill all the enemies. And I mean, if you have the clever rat ring, if you have gone back to the 3-1 or something and gotten that, you can actually set it up here with the archers and maybe with some fall damage too. So if you want to boost your damage a little bit more, even though because this fight is not a threat whatsoever after you kill the archers, you could do that. Especially if you're doing a melee run though, I would recommend killing the archers regardless. And now of course, if you have any buffs, I would use them and you can knock him on his ass now. Now I do want to warn you that he does still do damage with his fall. And if he actually gets back up before he can kill it, it will actually hurt you with the crash that attack that he does when he laid out in the shield. But as you can see, it's still pretty much turned off. Even if it goes back up, it still will be turned off. So that is some good cheese right there. Now for Flamelurker. This one will actually require you to do the cutscene trigger first as well. As far as we've found so far, the trigger for the cutscene is huge. So we haven't been able to find a way to do this without triggering the cutscene first, which is a real problem for the speedrun, unfortunately. Not the most handy one in the magic runs. This was also found by Nut himself. So first thing you should do is trigger the cutscene. You'll see that it is activated right now, and then quit out. And then get to the right edge of the fog wall, and just kind of go in this direction. Try to not get caught in the rocks by following this path that I'm taking right there. And if you did it right, you should be pretty much turned off. The health bar won't show up at the bottom, and as you can see, even if you hit it, it's still turned off. So now if you got to use any buffs for your stuff, feel free. And just wail on him. I'm sure this will be cathartic for a lot of people, given that it is one of the harder bosses in the game. And there will be a lot of those that I think you'll all be pleased by. We'll get to those soon. And there he goes. Of course, we did have to do armor spider before getting here, and there is no cheese for that with the bow tech freeze, but we don't really need it. In the previous video, we did have a way to get behind the boss that pretty much allows us to cheese that one without this. Alright, next up, Adjudicator. So this one was actually found by me, and it is going to require you to have range damage. So I would recommend either a bow with either a lot of arrows or decent damage, or Soul Ray or something long range that has a lot of range. And just a friendly reminder, you can use the boss fog by going backwards after the bow tech to turn off AI. So if you want to kill this Black Phantom so we can retry the skip a couple times, feel free. But here's how I like to line it up. I like to put my bow reticle around here, just towards the center of that line of the pillar, and then mash X as fast as possible, and then go back to L1 as fast as possible, because you can't exactly have them at the same time. If you do it well enough, you should glitch pretty much up to the top floor of this area, which is above where the Adjudicator can aggro to you. So this floor below us is where the fog wall is, the normal one where you can lick at you. But if we're actually one tier higher than that, which you normally can't access, there is a flooring, thank God. And he doesn't seem to aggro to us, so you can't use his tongue attack all the way up here. And even better, if you shoot it, he doesn't aggro. So this is a little bit different of a cheese, but it does work pretty much the same as a cheese. So just shoot him with a couple arrows, couple soul rays, whatever you got. Just a spell or a weapon that has really long range, and you should be able to kill it. Easy peasy. Now don't jump down all the way to the base floor, because I did realize that this is actually a deadly fall from all the way up there. First drop to the floor right below you, and then drop to the bottom. There is actually a skip for Adjudicator you can use with the bow tech, which I will make a video for at some time in the near future. Next one up is Leechmonger. You don't actually need to trigger the cutscene for this. You actually don't want it to trigger the cutscene, so I will briefly discuss how to reset this if you mess it up. So this one's a little bit tricky. It's a little precise, but I'll try to describe it as best I can. So what I like to do is put myself right in this corner, just walk right into it, to the point where if I hit X to go to the fog wall, my character will have to turn first. That way it gives some little leeway so I can press L1 a little bit later. So I press X, and then immediately L1, and then very, very quickly, within a second, you will need to turn right, because otherwise you're going to get stuck in the wall to the left. Or if you go too far right, too early, you are going to trigger the boss fog. So you pretty much want to get between this rock and mushroom area. If you get that right, you should be able to see that the boss is actually there. The cutscene normally triggers the full activation of the boss, so it is kind of spawned in and you can't thankfully hurt it. So that means you can just wail on it as fast as you can. You will take some slight chip damage from the leeches that are still in the room in the water, but it should not really be an issue for you whatsoever. If you do mess this up and trigger the cutscene, or even if you actually fall out of bounds, I wouldn't actually recommend quitting out. I would recommend you do a forced quit, which is done by hitting the PS menu and then hitting close game from the dashboard or like the home menu of the PlayStation 5. Because if you do a quit out, you will still have the boss triggered, where if you do this before the boss is actually dead, you should be able to trigger it back. if you do a quit out after the boss is already activated, it will still be activated when you come back in. Whereas a force quit will revert that back to non-active. And being out of bounds can sometimes put you in a weird spot. So just do a force quit if you mess up any of these going forward. Now the Maneaters one. This, from the ones we can actually cheese via this method, this was definitely the hardest one to do. It is very precise, but thankfully because of that method that I was discussing to use a force quit, you can pretty much try this infinitely. I would also recommend you have a lot of arrows coming here or a really high damage bow, because you're actually going to hit it from outside of the box range. Basically what you want to do is pretty much get boosted to a very particular spot, but you do need to cut your distance a little bit by doing some tricky turns. And as you can see, you can actually land in really out of bounds areas that can definitely save you there. So again, for anything you mess up here, even if you die or go into the boss room, maybe you should just force quit instead of close the game. So this is how I successfully did it. I look behind me a little bit while facing the fog, click X, after like a split fraction of a second, go back to the wall, kind of at this angle right here. And if you get stuck here with the railing below you and you have a clear sight of the Maneaters, you did it right. I would recommend standing still. Now, this isn't over yet. I will show now how to actually harm the Maneaters, and obviously it's by using a ranged bow and stuff. I don't think soul rays would reach, so I like to bring on run arrows to get a poison first to kind of speed it up a little bit. Probably not really worth it, honestly. The poison isn't very much and it takes a long time to poison them. But I personally like to do that first for any encounter like this, like the blue dragon. And once it hits poison, you switch to maybe the light arrows, I think it's called. Whatever the ones that travel farther and do the most damage. Or you can use heavy arrows as well, but those are, you know, heavy. Who would have thought? But yeah, you can use this to pretty much kill the first Maneaters. Again, the cheese setup is not quite over yet. So before doing this, I would warn you to watch all the way through. Now that the first Maneater is dead, if we go out, you can actually see that we're kind of stuck in our position. But from what I've seen so far, you can pretty much fix it every time, but it will be a little bit scary. So just kind of wiggle around. After trying it for a while, I found that running towards the wall in the back helps. So once you get on wedged here, I will try my best to get like on top of this little railing. You can see I got stuck again, which is, you know, a little annoying, but once I find out the running against the wall seems to do it, it helped a lot. So I recommend getting around here and then just kind of rolling to the bridge again. So it is possible that you will fail this and fall to your death. So it is very tricky, as I said. So if you do that, so you can preserve your arrows and stuff, you should do a force quit again. And let's try this whole process again. Now, unfortunately, you do still have to fight the second one manually. But if you play it extra safe, and I mean the second one's out of the picture already, hopefully this should be good enough. So it is a kind of a half cheese strategy. But I would recommend, since there's only one, just kind of stick to the middle where the fire torch is and just kind of fight it there. Yeah, hopefully that's good enough for y'all. And then I know it is a little difficult. Like, I won't say this is the most handy one. There is already a Maneater skip as well if you'd like to see that. I can link that at the very end of the video too. But if you still like their soul for whatever reason and what have you, just have the archstone there, this is what you can do. Alright, now we got old King Allant, false King Allant, whatever you want to call him. This one will also be a little bit precise. This one was found by Experimit. Wait, was it? Oh no, it's not. Shit. This was found by Nut with the cutscene trigger, which meant for speedruns that meant that was pretty much a time loss if you would try to do this, because we had to ride the elevator back up, which is I think around 50 seconds. So that's not useful. But then one of our runners, Ducklear, actually found a way to do it without the cutscene. So now it's a time save for sure, or potentially anyway. So we are going to use the elevator ride up to help with a setup, because this one is a little precise, but it should be consistent. I've found that it's pretty consistent once you get it down pretty well. So what we want to do, I even take off my fancy little top hat so you can see this better. You want to have your camera pretty much parallel to this wall right here as you ride up the elevator. And then line up your head with these two lines on the left side. As center as possible. It's not super precise. You can have some little bit of leeway, but make sure your character's facing forward, parallel to the wall, and that your head is lined up with this well enough. I would recommend having 0.7 speed for camera speed. I think the left side works better than the right altogether, even though there should be symmetrical, so just stick with the left, I would recommend. Yeah, once you get near the fog wall, there's these little ball bearing looking things in the wall there. Next, you want to turn your camera to those and have your head be lined up with those instead now, once you get there. It should also not be too precise. Once you're lined up, you want to mash X so you can cross the fog. And then immediately as soon as you can hit L1, the fog isn't crossable yet. You just want to mash X until you get there. But once you see actual architecture from the boss room, immediately hold right to go right. And if you did it right, you should see that there's no cutscene, no boss health, which meant that you did it right. So if you go up to the boss, you can see that he's not reacting to you whatsoever. You can even push him around, which is really funny. I will warn you not to push him to the part of the right. I'll explain why in a moment. I know this is one of the most coveted ones that I did in my original Cheese All Bosses video in 1.0, which is maybe not a good idea on my part. But as you can see here, I'm doing this in current patch, so you can do this on any version of the game right now. And it hasn't been a patch in over a year now. Yeah, just use any buffs you want, wail on him. Just make sure to stick away from the pile of rubble on the right. I'll explain why soon. And this 9-member boss for speedrunners, regular runners, challenge runners, no-hit runners is cake. Alright, so the reason you want to push him up to this rubble is because I actually did it just for fun. Just pushed him up here one time. And you can actually get out of your range if you push him up enough, because you can't climb this easily. And you can actually push him up this little like raised area, like this balcony looking area on the side. And you can reach that without range, so just a friendly warning to not push him up there. And there he goes. Alright, we are now going to talk about some bosses that, as of right now, we don't have a freeze for, at least in this method. There may be some of the cheeses for these, like in the previous video. So if you want to cheese these bosses another way, you can. But they should still theoretically be possible to cheese because of information I have on them. I do want to explain that I am not a glitch hunter myself. I did find a few strats right here, but they're not really things that I found. They're just kind of from information I have. So I can work with that. But I wouldn't call myself a glitch hunter either. So it's possible that there are some of these. But even the whole community hasn't found anything for these. So. But maybe you could. So this is a call for all the glitch hunters. These are some of the bosses I think you could possibly still cheese. Alright, first one up is Penetrator. So from some 1.0 version of the game experience that I have, I know that if you wrong warp into the room, the boss is still hittable. It's not activated and you can't even see it in some stages, but you can still hit it. Now, I think some of us theorize that if you maybe skip some of the Fat Official cutscenes as you run through 1.3, you might be able to freeze this guy because it's not properly activated with some of the cutscenes. So maybe that's what we have to do. We're gonna have to skip those cutscenes some way or another, just going around them, trigger line for those, and then get to this part. But as of right now, we actually can't seem to find a Penetrator AI freeze yet. Mind you, it's not the hardest boss whatsoever, especially if you have full health, so it's not a biggie, I would say, for even a lot of you. But again, I call to all the glitch hunters there. If you want to see if you can find something, I would highly recommend you give it a shot. The cutscene trigger does seem to be pretty wide, so it's hard to say if it is possible or not, but I think it theoretically should be. For Dragon God, I don't believe this boss is freezable, but I think it's possible that we may be able to do something else with it. So once again, with my experience of 1.0 and even the previous Cheese All Bosses video that I showed, if you go and trigger the second ballista first, we have seen that it does cut the HP of the boss by the proper amount that it would have by the second one. Now, the boss itself is in a really glitched spot, meaning that you can't hit it with melee as you should and be able to in the normal fight. But if you have any range damage, it should be no problem whatsoever. So what I would recommend for any glitch hunters who want to see if anything helps with this is see if you can get yourself to the second ballista first. And then for at least for like the speedrunners out there, we could use like a soul ray or something to finish it off. That would definitely be a big time save. Because we already do have the pillar phasing and all that, but if we could get to the second ballista first, that would actually be ideal. And there does seem to be some out of bounds potential from what I've seen in, well, doing some slide testing myself. As you'll see some of it. But I didn't quite was able to find anything else. So it could be there's some stuff going on. It seems like there might not be. But I do think in theory this should also be possible. Main Astraea falls in the exact same category as Penetrator. Due to force quit speedrun categories that I've done, I know for a fact that if you go into the boss room, wrong warp in there, and not trigger the cutscene and all that, you can for a fact find the Maiden not activated. It seems like even if you do go out of bounds and try to get in bounds with the bow tech, that it doesn't seem to be a lot of ways to get in there. But it also seems really, really close. I was able to skip the cutscene at the very least, which is kind of hopeful for sure. Because I believe the cutscene would be the main thing that triggers the fight. Although it does have a health bar after you cross the tunnel enough, so who knows for sure. But this one should also theoretically be possible if you're able to cross all this. Okay, and that should actually be the last one for the theoretically possible. I'll now be discussing some ones that should be theoretically impossible, but that's not to discourage anyone from doing anything. I'll still encourage anyone to try and find anything if they want. Right, so the Vanguard is really tricky because the tutorial, if you're able to quit out, you will be warped back to like either the beginning or I found through some kind of glitchy method, so you can actually maybe warp to the second area of the tutorial, but you will never spawn like right back where you were, like in the rest of the game. So testing the tutorial is extremely annoying for this reason. Sometimes it'll even result in crashing if you go into the wrong place and stuff, but I do want to point out that I was able to kind of skirt the trigger of the Vanguard. So technically I did go into the fog without triggering him. The main issue is that, and funnily enough, it actually seemed to kind of forego that animation he does when you enter the fog if you do the little roar. But if you walk too close to it, or if you actually shoot it with a bow or something for range, it will actually activate. So this one doesn't feel like it's possible, but who's to say there isn't some other kind of thing you can find. Funnily enough, it does seem like if you walk into the fog and then go backwards, he still can't hit you from outside the fog. And even funnier too is that you're actually immortal in most of the tutorial, so even if you go out of bounds and fall to your death, quote unquote, you still will be fine. So I thought maybe if he killed me without being inside the boss room, I wouldn't actually die. But no, it turns out he actually can't kill you into the fog, so I guess it's tied to his entity hitting you instead of where you are. Alright, so Armored Spider, I did try a little bit with this one. Doesn't seem like there's much to it. The tunnels seem to be one of those things so you can't just like go back inbounds if you go out of bounds from the fog gate. And from the knowledge I have from both Force Quit and the normal speedrun with Armored Spider skip, we know for a fact that if you hit it from behind when you warp in, when you wrong warp in, it will still kind of activate from you hitting it. Now, because you were behind it, that does mean that it can't hurt you for the most part. Only the explosion attack with the fire can hurt you. But if you stay far away enough from it, it doesn't. So I don't think there's any like AI freeze cheese for this as possible, but we don't need it is the thing. With the current spider skip, which is really consistent and easy to do, and just hitting it from behind, even with really slow damage, it's not an issue. We don't need a cheese for this boss. We already kind of have one. So. Alright, so the old monk bow tech memes that was found by some people in the community is the only one I couldn't pull off myself. I wasn't really sure how to do it, and I couldn't find the videos where people did it, I don't think. But from what I've been told, This is also like Vanguard in that even if you go out of bounds where it doesn't detect you, and then you hit it with ranged, it will aggro to you. And once it gets like below you where the spot you can be at, it seems like it won't be able to be hit from there, so you can't really cheese it the same way, I don't think, from out of bounds, unfortunately. Maybe you could find something with like Poison Cloud or something if you're able to get back inbounds, but given that I couldn't do it, I just didn't feel like bothering, especially if I knew that it wasn't going to be possible. But I mean, if you know how to manipulate this guy, it's not even that hard. Like I did show, I think, the chair strat in the original video. You can do something very similar with just backstab. So just luring him into hitting chairs. And then when he does, just get behind them for a backstab. That is plenty. You can just kind of have him in a cycle like that. As long as you careful of the homie soul arrow. So if you're doing this offline and such, it should be pretty good. Alright, now for Dirty Colossus. This one also tried briefly to see if I can find anything. But with some things that I tried at 1.0, I did realize this is another boss that triggers as long as you're in the room, no matter where you come from, even if you wrong warp in there. So even if I don't hit it, it actually does aggro to me from behind as soon as it notices me. So I don't think this one's one that you can really cheese in the same way. Whether you can skip it or not might be more useful in this case. Especially if you can just forego a lot of the area to get here. And I did find some really interesting spots when I was trying to go out of bounds, especially to the right. Because you can actually drop to like a swampy area. But it doesn't seem to be any way to climb back up to them or get past them or like fight them from here. There was even some like wood planks that seem like they'll be vaultable, but they don't seem to be. So I don't know, there could be something here for like glitches and stuff, and hopefully getting past them altogether. It's better fighting him. But as far as cheesing him, I mean the cheese in the original videos is really good, honestly, if you want to use magic and maybe even just bow. So that's probably good enough as is. Alright, the last few ones I think are actually impossible to freeze in the same way. But I think there could be some that are still cheesable or at least helpful to do a bow tech or some sort. So the first one is Fool's Idol. Of course, you still will have to kill this enemy on top, but so far we don't have any way to bypass this killing this guy. You can actually bypass the cutscene trigger for the Fool's Idol, is something I do want to point out, which is really nice. But if you know how the boss fight works, you would know that the boss isn't even in the room if you don't trigger the cutscene. So even though the boss health shows up, the boss isn't anywhere near. So it doesn't seem like she's even like invisible or anything. She's just not loaded in at all. At least what it appears to be. Maybe she's like somewhere we can reach. We just haven't noticed it yet. By the way, this still could be useful. So one thing you could do is do this first before the boss. Kill all the enemies around the room so they don't get in the way. If you've fought this boss before normally, you probably notice that they can't get very in the way. And what I recommend is if you kind of know where she can potentially place a lot of the teleporting or a lot of the paralyzing circles in the ground, what I think you could do is maybe place some prism stones where she would spawn them ahead of time. Obviously we have to do some research to see where she can, but that could also help out if you want to go that far, if you're willing to plan out ahead of time before you actually do the fight. Now of course if you come here with really high damage at the very end, especially with Clever Rat and all the enemies dead, you can actually just kind of destroy her as well. So even that's not much of an issue if you have high enough DPS. Alright, so for Old Hero, as you may know with some of the skips that are available for this, and even one new one that's even better than the previous skip we used to use, which I'll make a video on sometime soon as well. You may know that you actually can't trigger the boss from the fog gate. You have to trigger it from a line inside the boss, which is pretty nice. I kind of like that. You can still be in the fog room, but still have time to prepare. But for cheesing purposes, this is definitely a bit of a downside because you can't actually... like, the boss isn't spun in here whatsoever. And you have to trigger it via that line, so there isn't any way to cheese it with AI freeze whatsoever. I don't think there would be. I think it would also be impossible. But given how the fight works already, with maybe just some thief ring / cloak strats, this could actually be really easy as well. And I do believe you can poison that too, so even that is even better if you want to go that route. Given that this boss itself may not be the worst part of the fight, but maybe rolling up to this, I will link the current ritual path skip video that I have. But there is an even better skip that might be a little more tricky in some ways to do. But once that video is up, I will link that in the iCard as well, or replace the other one. Because that one is even more handy once you actually have it down, for sure. Alright, and lastly, for this video, Storm King is not cheesable because of the fact that it's not in the room if you don't trigger the cutscene. But I did realize that you can actually bypass the cutscene. And what you could do is peacefully go into the room with no enemies or the boss in the room and loot some of the stuff in there. You can get some extra arrows from inside the boss room. And the main things that I'm hinting at here is that you could go get the Storm Ruler early, which in a way is a little better. So unless you're doing a speedrun, that might not be ideal. And then once you actually get the Storm Ruler, you could do one or two things. You can quit out, which will put you in front of the fog gate, or you can actually go backwards to the boss room and just trigger the boss from inside the boss room, because the line will be triggered from there too. You can just get close enough to fog gate and just trigger it as well. So you can start the fight right away with Storm Ruler, or maybe more arrows than you had before if you're going to use a bow or something. Or maybe just not fight altogether. Just quit out, go back to the Archstone or whatever. You only want the Storm Ruler. You don't want to fight this boss yet. You can just go grab it and go back. Maybe you're doing a trolley build with the Storm Ruler, as some people like to do. So again, I do have a couple of strategies I did do in my previous Cheesaw Boss video. So that video is still relevant in some ways. I am thinking maybe one day I'll remake it all together with what I think is the most ideal way to cheese everything. But not yet. I do think it's more interesting to update this for now. And who knows, maybe new strats will be found for some of these bosses too, so. Alright, and that'll be all for this video. Again, like I said, I do think some of the cheeses from the previous video are still worthwhile. That video is still relevant. I wouldn't discard a lot of cheeses that are in that video. You may need both of them to get a clean run through the game with cheeses. I'll also recommend you use as a reference. So again, if you would like to see that, I'll put the link at the end card. Just to break it down all together in one clean little list. As of right now, you can use an AI freeze for Tower Knight, Flamelurker, Adjudicator, Leechmonger, half of Maneaters, and Old King Allant. The ones that should theoretically be possible are Penetrator, Maiden, Astraea, and Vanguard. Whether they're AI freezes or not is another matter entirely. The theoretically impossible would be Vanguard, Armored Spider, Old Monk, and Dirty Colossus. And the ones that I think are outright impossible with the freeze at least, but maybe there are some other strategies, are Fool's Idol, Old Hero, Storm King, and Phalanx, which I didn't mention necessarily in a card, but we did use another cheese for that as well. And just for treat that everyone that got this far, I do want to do a breakdown of what I would think is the ideal cheese for all of this. So I will include cheeses from the last video just in a quick little list so you can reference back to them easily. So for Phalanx, I would recommend this cheese in this video. For Armored Spider, I would recommend the cheese in the last video. For Fool's Idol, I would recommend the cheese in the last video, maybe with some added strategy from this one. For Adjudicator, I would recommend the cheese from this video. For Leechmonger, I would recommend the cheese from this video. For Tower Knight, I would recommend the cheese from this video. For Flamelurker, the one from this video. For Maneaters, I guess a mix of both this video and the last one. For Old Hero, I guess the last one. There wasn't much to this one, I suppose. The Colossus, definitely last video. Dragon God, I guess the pillar phasing I briefly discussed in the last video. So for current patch. Hopefully something's found for that, it's even better. For Old Monk, I guess they both kind of work, just depending on the build if you're doing melee or magic run. Obviously this one's more melee based altogether. Maybe just a little bit of bow action. Storm King, I guess it depends on the video as well, but this one definitely getting the Storm Ruler early is nice if you need it. If you don't, then I guess not. Main Astraea, definitely the first video where you can just shoot her from the balcony on the side. A little bit more melee-esque. Well, I guess bow isn't melee, but you know, melee build kind of situation. Penetrator, I guess the last one, but I mean, that wasn't the best cheese in my opinion either. Hopefully something is found for that too. And King Allant definitely this video as well. So yeah, hopefully I'll get to make a final version of all these cheeses all together one day. Hopefully more cheeses are found all together with the Botech or everything else. But I did want to keep you guys updated with some spicy new cheeses that allows us to cheese a good percent of the cast. There was very few that would consider not being able to cheese all together now with this. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope you have fun with these. It's nice to replace some of these games sometimes with some more cheesy stuff. Alright, so like I said earlier, I do have the previous Cheese All Bosses video that I will link now for the end card. And I do have a video that describes the entire glitch in really good depth, describing how it works and why it works. And if you like Demon's Souls content, do make sure to subscribe to me. I make videos on Demon's Souls pretty much exclusively. So if you like this game, you'll right at home. Alright, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys later.